First of all, to you, Richard, you have full confidence, we know that, in Boris Johnson, but do you think he's been damaged by this confidence vote? Because when we look at his predecessors, yes, they won confidence votes, but they went on then to lose their jobs as party leaders, as Prime Minister, or in the case of John Major, went on to a heavy defeat at a general election.
Well, it all depends what happens next, and of course that power is in the hands of myself and my Conservative colleagues. And as the Professor was saying, what the public can see very quickly is if political parties in Parliament are divided, people say, well, how can you get anything done? So I would say the Prime Minister is potentially damaged, but now the Conservative MPs, if they rally around and try and secure some of those issues you said are still on the to-do list, I think he's in a very strong position.
And when you look at that to-do list, I know there were lots of promises in that manifesto, but they're just 1 out of 5 so far met. Do you worry that actually 2 years is now quite a short period of time, if it is even 2 years, to get all of the stuff done?
Well, I think it's fair to say that part of that 2 years was focused on things that weren't conceived of when the manifesto came out in 2009, which obviously with COVID and the COVID response. So we're having to now refocus efforts of the government on the manifesto commitments. I wouldn't rule us out. I mean, on the second day of the test match this week, no one thought England had a chance to win. I think the Prime Minister's got a great chance to deliver on his manifesto pledges.
Richard, do you think he will lead your party into the next general election?
Yes.
And does it matter, like Stephen said, that potentially voters don't trust him, but they still like him?
Well,
I mean, does it matter to you if, for example, it's found that he misled Parliament when we get to the Privileges Committee report?
Well, profoundly, yes. I think ethics, Stephen and I would absolutely agree that ethics in public office is important. We may disagree about what the action should be. And my view is that the Prime Minister has the challenge now not only to deliver on those manifesto commitments, but he's got to prove every single day that he understands that integrity in office is important to the British public as well. And I think
in your view, from what you've heard since you've been in Parliament, what you've heard when he talked about Partygate, he's not misled Parliament. He had no idea that those parties were going on.
I don't think he willfully misled Parliament at all, no.
Richard, there's going to be very tricky times ahead, isn't there? We think inflation could go up as high as 11%. We saw there problems with the backlog in the NHS, people waiting at A&E, but also today heard that 1 in 9 people across the country are now on NHS waiting lists. This next winter coming is going to be difficult, whatever you do, isn't it?
There are substantial problems, and a lot of those caused by global forces, but a lot of things that we need to act on and we can control domestically. I'm concerned, in addition to what you've mentioned, that the Bank of England is going to be too slow on money supply and then overreact. And I'm also very worried about Russian advances in Ukraine and what the consequences should be for world grain prices and world food prices if they strike Odessa.
And £400 billion spent on tackling COVID, it's going to be very difficult to find room for tax cuts that a lot of your colleagues are calling for, isn't it?
Not at all. In fact, I would say if monetary policy is tightening, you need an expansionary fiscal policy, and that means you can either increase public spending or you can look for tax cuts. And I would hope the Chancellor in due course will be looking to provide tax cuts and get us back on track with what Conservative governments are expected to do, which is give people more of their own money back and spend less of it themselves.
Isn't that the difficult thing, Richard, that no matter how much money the government spends on this, actually inflation will mean most people are going to feel worse off this year anyway? Well,
inflation is the thing that hurts almost everyone, particularly those on fixed incomes and pensions, which is why it's so important the government take action to control inflation. It's such a pity that the Labour Party doesn't seem to be opposing the rail strikes. Here is a set of strikes that are occurring for employees who are on average earning substantially more than most of my constituents. They're striking to stop working people get to work for a pay rise that will bust inflation.
But in government, shouldn't it be the government and the Transport Secretary meeting the rail unions or trying to meet the rail unions and negotiate and work out how they can stop this?
Well, yes, they should, but of course you don't do that with a gun to your head. So the unions should call off their strike action, recognise that life is tough for everyone. The people need to get to work to earn money, and the Labour Party should row in 100% behind the government and stop pandering to the rail unions.
Richard, is it a good idea to send asylum seekers to Rwanda?
Well, it's a good idea to stop people coming across.
But is the right thing to do to charter that plane?
You mentioned an alternative. Labour have for months tried to say that they might have no alternative. So,
but is it a good use of taxpayers' money in your constituency to charter a plane that even before the European Court got involved had as few as 4 asylum seekers on it?
So in my constituency, we have a detention centre, and I protest again. I do not like detention at all, and I think our immigration system has wrestled with problems for a number of years. And under consecutive Conservative governments, we've made progress in the mess it was in. But there's a specific problem about these criminal gangs saying you can make a choice between finding and claiming asylum in France and coming to the UK and claiming asylum here. We need to break that, and we need to find an answer to, or at least to test something that may be an answer there. And I think Priti Patel needs support for trying to test that. We don't know if it's working. It's a practical thing to make if it can work, but she should be given the chance to see that policy through.